Tonight on the Bigfooty Cats podcast, Pure Ownage and the Jester join me to discuss the ruck, the forward line setup, some emerging midfielders, and a preview of the first game of the season. Don't go anywhere, because all that and more is coming right up.
We're blue and white, there's not a doubt. We play the game to win. A team that knows commitment, that's the way it's always been. We rise up to the challenge, we give the game our all. With sheer determination, we going for the ball. When the crowd thunders, go Cats, we break the banner down. We know they'll play with courage till the final siren sounds. And the rival team will know that they've been run down by a pack. When you're beaten by, defeated by the Cats. In a cat attack, go Cats, cat attack.
My name is Gus, and hello and welcome to the Josh Caddy Show. It's actually the Bigfooty Cats podcast, but thanks for tuning in. Someone who's had a far better pre-season than Motlop, coming to us all the way from Jakarta, it's the Jester. How you going?
Oh, good, thanks, mate. A little bit under the weather with the cold, but very much looking forward to finishing the podcast we attempted to start a few weeks ago.
And the Geelong Advertiser's been all over him. He's been absolutely training the house down. It's Pure Ownage. Welcome to the show.
G'day guys, welcome back. Good thing we've got the internet back and the football's back, so we're better late than never.
Had a couple of technical difficulties over the pre-season. It's probably our fourth attempt at recording the podcast, I'd say.
Yep.
And we're without our fearless leader, SJ, tonight. Done a bit of a Josh Cowan, gone a bit AWOL.
Yeah, he's probably off, doing things with his life rather than sitting in front of a computer screen arguing about footy, something crazy like that.
Yeah, it's true. He's actually one of my good friends outside of Bigfooty, and he is very busy. When he's not recording things on Foxtel from footy to upload to YouTube. But he'll be back soon.
Good stuff. Guys, what do you think of the pre-season? Good to have footy back?
Oh, very much so. Really good games from Geelong, but also some pretty good games in the first half of the split round as well.
I think it was good to kick it off with that win over Collingwood. It was actually a strangely exciting game, considering it meant absolutely zilch. What do you think, Pierre?
Yeah, I thought it was. I thought on the whole it was a pretty good pre-season. We seemed to be competitive in all three games. Most of the guys who we needed to improve, guys like Guthrie and Caddy and Taylor Hunt, they all look pretty good in the pre-season. Yep. We actually got some ruckmen out there, so I think it's been pretty positive. I don't read much into practice games generally. I think form-wise they don't tell you much, but it looks like we're in pretty good shape.
Now, before we get into the bulk of the show, we might just touch on our injury list at the moment, which is quite extensive since we last spoke. We've got George Burberry, Alan Christensen, Daniel Menzel, Stephen Motlop, Joel Selwood, Nathan Vardy, and we'd assume Josh Cowan, but we've really got no idea there.
And Shane Kirsten, too.
And Shane Kirsten, who's not on this one. So absolutely decimated in almost every line of the ground there.
And Jared Jansen, he's come down with something, apparently.
Oh, really?
Yeah, hot spot in the foot.
Lovely.
Okay.
That's just what we need.
So, yeah, the list just builds.
And it's not sort of, it's not really your niggly little 2 to 3 week ones. We've got, 11 weeks for Christensen. It'll probably be more. Round 5 for Burberry. Vardy's obviously the season, and Motlop, who knows?
Yeah, not ideal.
No.
And Joel Selwood's probably a bit of an unknown at this stage. It was said he had to get through a fitness test. We're unsure if he'll pull up for Thursday, but I guess we'll have to wait and see there. First topic tonight is who's played well over the pre-season. We saw a couple of positional changes there, I guess. A few players in some positions that we've been waiting to see them in quite a while. I'd say, Caddy and Guthrie in the midfield, a lot of people have been excited to see. And more specifically, we'll touch on the ruck in just a minute, but right off the bat, Cam Guthrie and Josh Caddy. I think I'll go to PO here. What have you thought of their pre-season?
Yeah, but very, very good. I've pumped Josh Caddy up a lot, as you know. I thought he was very harshly maligned last year. People didn't give him enough time to settle in at a new club. In terms of the fans, the club did, but a lot of us were pretty harsh on him. He's really taken a step forward this pre-season. I thought the the game that he played against Collingwood was just really, really, really good. And we will need him too, because we will miss Christensen a lot. And I think he's looking like he can basically, average 25 touches a game and have a real impact in the midfield and kick goals. And I thought Guthrie was fantastic in the preseason as well. Really looks like he's going to basically. I think they could both kind of do a Mitch Duncan this year, like become really good, solid, reliable, quality contributors. So that's good.
And they call him the Bull. I'm just loving his approach to the contest. It's not just the stats he's racking up, but he just refuses to accept that he's about to be tackled. Sometimes people sort of not a fan of him because of his disposal efficiency, I guess, which is sometimes in the 50s or the 60s. But you've got to take into account that sometimes he's got 3 players hanging off him when he gets that disposal out of the contest. He's just a clearance machine.
Very true. Very true.
Cam Guthrie, coming out of the back line, it looks like he will play a fair bit of midfield this season. Quite a few people aren't happy about that. TJ, I might start with you. What are your thoughts on Guthrie moving from the back line and potentially spending more time in the midfield this season?
I'm very happy about it, because I think one of the potential problems our midfield has had is maybe being a bit one-paced, particularly since Gazza left, which was a few years ago, and we've had a lot of success since then, obviously. But still, Guthrie's just got that burst of pace and that evasiveness that maybe the rest of the midfield doesn't have, and he uses it so well. I think even going back past pre-season, that goal he kicked against Hawthorn in the prelim final was just a thing of beauty, and I'd love him to. Yeah, I'd love the idea of that becoming more commonplace. I guess the other thing is, it is legitimate to say, well, are you robbing Peter to pay Paul, taking him out of the back line? But I think Thurlow showed enough last year to suggest he could really grow into a similar player and a similar role off halfback. So I'd quite like to see Guthrie go into midfield permanently, and Thurlow just play 20 games in the back line this season.
I definitely agree with you there on Thurlow. I think he's definitely showing enough to show he can do what Guthrie did last season and just come straight into the back line and really stay there. Taylor Hunt's another one who was relatively impressive over the pre-season. I guess we're still unsure if he's planned for the midfield or the back line. PO, what did you think of Taylor Hunt?
I thought, and I think that's really important for me. Like generally I'm a Guthrie in the back line sort of guy, but I'm coming around to the idea that, okay, he can play more in the midfield, particularly with the injuries we have, if we've got good someone else to step in. And Taylor Hunt's the only one on the list who's really done it before. If you're talking about someone who could come in, he's done that. He started as a defender at AFL level before he became a tagger last year. And I thought it was really interesting in the preseason. They basically, if you look at the two of them, they pretty much split their time 50-50 between back line and the midfield. Like even in the last practice game, Guthrie played up a bit and then back a bit. Taylor Hunt played on Harvey, so he tagged for half, and then he played as the small defender for the second half. So I think they're going to try and swap them around whenever they obviously, and this is something they'll do with the interchange cap anyway. They'll want to rotate a lot of people. I think he'll be the guy that goes back if and when Guthrie goes into the midfield.
TJ, what do you think about Taylor Hunt's pre-season?
Yeah, it was pretty good. I guess he's a pretty divisive player. I imagine if Mitch Brown didn't exist, we'd have 40-page threads bagging Taylor Hunt instead.
Go on.
And I am a fan of Taylor Hunt, but he does have weaknesses in his game. His disposal can be a bit iffy under pressure. His ability to lock down an opponent, to the extent Guthrie did, sort of remains open to question. But yeah, he seemed pretty good, and I'd like to. He's got the experience now where he should be playing consistently in the seniors. I guess the other player I'll throw to you two guys, who got a run in the back line again to sort of tepid reception, was Billy Smets. And so how did you see him?
No.
Yeah, it's
No. No.
It's hard for me to consider it with a straight face, I guess I'd put. I can't remember which game it was. It was the first game we saw him in the back line, and he looked lost. I can't help but think he just does not belong there. Like a half-back running role, maybe, but this kind of lockdown small defender role, I don't want to see him anywhere near that kind of position.
Yeah, I just, for me, like, I don't, aside from his off-field issues, I don't worry about Smets as a player. He's got a lot of talent, but if a major weakness in the guy's game, and it's probably, everybody has a weakness. Taylor Hunt has a weakness. He has a weakness. His major weakness is, and I saw it in the VFL Grand Final, kind of trying to blind turn into three blokes. Yeah. The worst place to play a player who does that, the back half, because there is so much frontal pressure. You have multiple tacklers, and any mistake's a goal. So for me, that's I'd play him in the ruck before I play him as a defender. Honestly, I really would. Just quickly, what I would say about Taylor Hunt, like, he's got his weaknesses, and he'll certainly he'll be tested this year. But it is important to be kept in mind that he was a player who was flying last year before he got injured. Like, he was probably our most improved young player.
Early on, he was among the best.
And then he got injured, and it was just like, different guy, terrible. So it's not like he hasn't shown that he can play at AFL level. We should have some confidence he actually has. And obviously, it's his sixth year on the list. So he really, this year has to be the year. So I do have some confidence he can do that. And hopefully Smets can stay in the forward line.
I think Taylor Hunt's season, you make a really good point. It almost mirrored Varco's season in a way, that he was just in stunning form early on, and then coming back from an injury, almost non-existent form. Varco's another issue altogether.
Yeah, speaking of divisive players.
Just on Smets there, where do we see his role being? I've even heard midfield floated, if not in the back line.
For me,
I would say midfield, long term.
Yep.
I didn't think he was totally terrible in the preseason, but again, like, PO's totally right. He and I think MC Extra Dollop, which is a slightly ridiculous name to say out loud, I have to say.
It's kind of the first time we've ever had to say that.
One of the Geelong board's best posters. He made the point that he just doesn't look like he's got the sort of skills of a lockdown defender. You guys have said it. His disposal and decision-making can be a bit iffy. They're all things that you would think would weigh against him being in the back line. But he took some really strong marks. He's got that turn of pace. So I would think in the midfield, but I do wonder, does he have to spend 10 games in the VFL, or a stretch in the VFL, even like Caddy did last year, where he racks up some big numbers and they just play him there permanently, and he sort of forces his way into the side rather than sort of getting AFL games but in bit part roles.
But it's sort of getting to the point for him where he really needs to be a regular in the side. Like, it's not a force your way into the side from the VFL situation. It's a make or break, almost find yourself a position and perform kind of situation.
Yeah. I mean, you would think they might have actually played him this week before he got the injury in the North game, so he might be around it.
Yeah.
But I think, with all that, for me, one of the things we really lack in the team will be interesting to see who they select tomorrow night. But a medium forward is something we really lack with all the injuries that we have, and I think he actually has a good skill set for that. That's where he'd play for now if it was me.
But surely Jordan Murdoch's ahead of him in that respect.
Fully fit, yes, but Murdoch hasn't played much preseason himself, and hasn't really impressed. I know, he's been injured, fair enough. So, that might be an option that we need to look at.
I guess we'll touch on that later when we discuss the forward line in more depth. One very big positive from the preseason, the ruck situation. Finally, hallelujah. Simpson, McIntosh, Blitzarves. What do you think? PO, I'll go to you.
Oh, I'm delighted, we were just saying before we recorded the show, those of you who are regular podcast viewers would know, I used to refer to Hamish as the Loch Ness Monster on previous podcasts because I didn't think he existed.
He was a myth.
I thought he was a myth. And to be honest, I pretty much kind of thought he was going to retire. So Hamish, if you're listening, very sorry. You can be my new Josh Caddy, maybe. But no, really, I was.
It's not go that far.
Please do tweet us, Hamish. But no, I was really pleased. Like he actually looked like the sort of player I remember him being at North. Like he's a good tap ruckman, but what was always impressive about McIntosh was just like he can be a bit ungainly at times, but his follow-up stuff is just so good. It kind of reminds me of Brad Otten's actually, like he's not actually that good at ground level, but what he does is he creates a pass for other people, and he did that a lot in the North game. I was really impressed actually. His fitness, and this is something we'll talk about with the rucks in a minute, his fitness is the major issue, and how we get game time into him without compromising the side because he's not fit enough to run a full game at this stage. That's a very tricky issue. But I thought, given the bloke hasn't played for 2 years, it was pretty good actually.
TJ, what did you think of McIntosh in the preseason?
Yeah, I thought he was... obviously great to actually just see, yes, he exists. Yes, he can still actually play football. And, good for him. Like, it must be really difficult not to be able to sort of play trade for 2 years. But it was hard to get a judgment on him given sort of how little game time he played. And it was a bit weird because I think Scotty has said a couple of times if he doesn't play, it won't be because he hasn't got match fitness. And you're like, well... then why didn't he play more of the practice games? So, yeah, good, and I'm confident he can play a role for us this year, but I'm not sure how well he'll do in the early rounds of the season.
The ruck situation as a whole, we've got Simpson, who was in some extremely good form last season. We were talking off air before he went down with that injury. He was actually among the top 3 ruckmen in the competition on... That's all we've got to go on. He was just... His numbers were top 3 in the competition as far as hitouts are concerned. And in a couple of games, he had 18, 16, 14 disposals to go with those 33 hitouts or 55 hitouts along with a couple of marks and tackles. So is Simpson clearly the number one with a fit ruck setup, or could McIntosh possibly force his way as the number one, or could we see both? TJ, I'll go to you.
Oh, who can say? It's just, without getting more of a sense of their form and actually sort of seeing the various combinations in action.
Yeah,
I just don't know. And it's interesting. Simpson's last game wasn't spectacular in the preseason, so I wonder even if it'll just be a horses for courses thing, and they'll rotate them based on individual form. But I know PO has some strong thoughts on the issue, so he can make up for my shameful lack of definitive opinion.
No, I think that it's a huge unknown for all of us. Like we talked last year about our rucks were injury prone, and then we only had one that was durable, and we traded him. So, the whole thing is unknown. So I don't really have any certain genius thoughts to add, but I would say a couple of things. One is that obviously we know McIntosh. They got McIntosh for a reason. That he hasn't played. I'm sure that wasn't the plan, and I'm sure the plan is not for him to spend half the season in the VFL. I don't think that's going to happen. And by the same token, I think they want to play Simpson as well. The key problem will be, I think they can fit in the same side. I certainly do, because they're both very, very good tap ruckmen. McIntosh is probably slightly ahead, but they're both very, very good. But they both actually get involved around the ground. Simpson drops back and takes marks. McIntosh goes forward and takes marks. They're not kind of useless at ground level. The issue is probably more neither of them is really that fit or that durable to run full games. And so structuring, like there's always a theory that, you take only maybe one player into a game that isn't quite at peak fitness, and we'll be looking at 2 of them and 2 of them playing in the ruck. So
But-
that for me is quite tricky.
But doesn't that make more of a case for having the 2 of them there, rotating the 2 and then, possibly subbing 1 later on? I
think
guess
so.
we'd sort of have 2 half players to sort of make 1 in a sense with the fitness there.
Yeah, well, I mean, Thursday will give us a very good look at this, and I know TJ has some strong thoughts on what we should do with Mark Blitzarve, so maybe he can say on that one. But I think Chris got floated in his press conference on Sunday that maybe we'll play all 3. If they're going to do that, clearly we're kind of going to copy what Hawthorn did last year, which is where they subbed one of their 2 ruckmen because they had Roughhead as well. They subbed one of their 2 specialist ruckmen in, I think, almost every single game. The only time they didn't do it was the game where Birchall got injured and a couple other things. So I think that would be our plan. Obviously, there's risk involved in that. There's a lot of risk because if someone else gets injured or someone is, playing as badly as Josh Hunt did in the prelim and you have to hook them, you're stuck with both the ruckmen. That's the risk, but I presume that's what they're going to try.
I think just before we move on to Mark Blitzarves, I think having the option of the 2, sometimes in a game, you feel like it's almost hard to pick someone you'd want to sub on some occasions.
Yeah.
And it's almost good to have that plan that, you're going to bring a speedy player on for a lanky 208 centimetre, 200 and whatever kilo player. Like you have that plan to get rid of him rather than taking out a player who's not having a bad game and could play a big part in the last quarter.
Yeah, it does. And also the other thing is, I think for both of Hamish and Simpson, because they've both got terrible injury histories, they're probably going to be a bit hesitant about, going flat out and doing a hammy or, something like that, because they both had a lot of really bad luck and we kind of feel sorry for them, So if you have that plan, you can actually say to one of the ruckmen at the start of the game, look, you can go flat out for 75 minutes.
Yeah.
You don't have to hold back and conserve yourself because you're going to get subbed. And they know that, and then they just go absolutely flat out and they play better.
Or on the other hand, they wouldn't have to go flat out if one of them wasn't getting subbed, which would be unlikely, I guess. But they wouldn't have to go flat out because they know that, they can have 10 minutes on the bench and still have an A-grade ruckman or an A-plus grade ruckman at every single centre bounce. I just can't stress enough how valuable that's going to be to have one of McIntosh or Simpson rather than Blitzarves when Simpson is on the bench at all times at every single throw up, every single centre bounce.
Yeah, I agree with that because we all saw last year the struggles that we had with clearances. Like I think our backline coach whoever that is, should get a pay rise after last year because we just, with so many games where we got absolutely belted in our midfield, but we really held together, and it'll be so much more beneficial to actually be able to at least break even, but get in front in the midfield. And we have 2 really, really good ruckmen who can do that. But I suppose the risk is just all the other stuff. When they're not rucking, what do we do with them? And, TJ might have some thoughts on that because obviously they're planning to do that and they're planning to do something else with Blitz. I'm not sure quite what yet.
TJ, what do you think?
Well, I was pretty skeptical of the whole, there was a lot of enthusiasm on the board in the early stages of pre-season for this idea that Blitzarves could be transformed into a wingman or a halfback flanker, and I just didn't really see it. And I just thought, no, he should be the second ruckman, and that's it. I've kind of changed my views a little bit in that I wonder if that the role that Blitzarves will play, it can't really be defined by existing player positions as we understand them. Like the way Scotty talks about him and really emphasises that combination of height and endurance, are they going to want to try and use him to always get an extra number at the contest potentially, which could become even more important with the interchange cap and teams fatiguing and so on? Is he going to? A lot of the time last year they tried to get a 2-on-1 in ruck contests where he'd run in to help West or Vardy. Are they going to keep doing that? Are they going to try and sort of run whoever his opponent is ragged so he can push down into the forward line and sort of pop up unmanned? Because his overhead marking, I think, was was probably his obvious glaring weakness last season, but that seems to have improved. So I have a feeling that the role that they're going to put him in might not sort of fit easily in the classifications as we understand them, but it won't really. It'll be a bit of ruck, but it'll be a bit of sort of all over the ground as well.
I really like the idea of not trying to squeeze him into the cookie cutter mold of an existing position, and rather letting him play to his strengths and nothing but that. We saw him around the contests in the preseason quite a bit against Collingwood, I believe it was, right in around the contests, and then again in Alice Springs and against North Melbourne as well. He has the height; he could go forward. A lot of people have said he could be, a medium tall defender. He could be running off halfback or a wing. I think having a player like that in the side, if anyone gets injured and is unavailable for the rest of the game, he could almost play any position on the ground. And just the fact that he's in the side could be very valuable in that respect. What do you think, Leo?
Yeah, and I agree with that. I think it's very hard to box him, and I think he's got the athletic ability to play in so many different roles. I suppose the thing for me that I hope, because he had such a good season last year, we were really lucky he came on because, ruck wise, and I doubt they drafted him as a ruckman. He was kind of, everyone else is gone. I think even Josh Walker was injured. It was like, you must go. It's you or Bartel. Like,
it was the most.
And it was just, we found a really good player out of something kind of we never would have actually intended to do, I think.
Yeah.
My concern is just like, he's athletic enough. I think TJ's right to like play anywhere. We don't need to box that. I figure, when you're coming to learn footy, it's the hardest thing to learn is all not the physical stuff because he's so fit, but where to run, how to understand the game, what's happening in front of you. He's had a whole year of learning that in the ruck. It's going to be hard for him to then go and learn that in a whole different position. And hopefully his development will still go forward. That's just what worries me a little bit. But, if the guy's a smart learner, then I'm sure he'll be able to pick up a second position.
Maybe we should put Mickey Luxford in the ruck. We might find another gem in the Category B rookie.
Yeah.
Better than Josh Walker.
Yeah, please, just before we move on from the ruck, please, at no point can we see Josh Walker in the ruck this year. Even with Blitzars as the only backup, anyone but Josh Walker in the ruck. It's not enjoyable viewing.
This is an interesting thought, gents, but last year, if you don't count Blitzars, well, I suppose now we do count him, but anyway, including Blitzars, we started last year with 5 ruckmen on our list. We now start 3. This year. We haven't played a game yet. Walker is already the 4th ruckman on our list.
Yeah.
So he's moved up. Now, that's just because Vardy doesn't exist this year, but he's moved up already.
And I don't like it at all. Anyway, do you guys think at any point this season we will see Josh Walker selected as a ruckman?
Yes, I do. For a want of alternatives. Because as P.O. has said, with the injury histories of Simpson and McIntosh, you would just think at some point they're going to be in a position where they basically need a 4th ruckman, and Walker's all we've got.
I was going to say, it better only be a bet against GWS, but that's probably not a good idea after their performance on the weekend.
I think, that was good. I think it's possible because we'll have to nurse Simpson and McIntosh a bit because obviously now that, and TJ will talk a bit about this in a minute, but now that Vardy is gone, it's imperative we don't lose another ruckman, and those guys need some management with their histories. So I think it's going to get to a point where for a game or two, either we're going to ruck Walker or we're going to ruck Hawkins, and as Josh is a trier, but that's the point really though. Like, would you rather send Josh out to do the donkey's job? Like I saw a post on Bigfooty that basically said we let him ruck because he's not valuable. He's not valuable.
Yeah, I remember that. Yeah,
and that's kind of true. Like, would you rather ruck him or would you rather ruck Tom Hawkins? When you look at it in that context, I think you kind of go, yeah, I can live with that a bit.
I think that post about Josh Walker, it was it was the game before McIntosh came back or the one before that. But Blitzarves was being tried in more of a midfield role. And it was almost like they just needed someone, a tall person, to put in a ruck-like position for that game so that they could worry about other players for 2 hours. Like, he's just a workhorse that they just kind of shoved in that spot.
That's true. And they like his work rate and his commitment. And so I think he's going to get some opportunities this year, just hopefully as a forward.
Anyway, moving on. Speaking of forward lines, I'll go to TJ here. TJ, I know you've got lots of thoughts on this. Where would you like to begin?
Well, yeah, lots of thoughts. So there was this big, lots of thoughts. I just have to sort of order them in a coherent way. Obviously, one of the big sort of concerns at the start of preseason, but particularly in the last, month to 6 weeks, has been how we're going to kick all our goals because there's been all these injuries. We let go of Podsiadly. And to give it some statistical perspective, I was doing some maths earlier today, which could be dramatically wrong, but hopefully not. Geelong kicked 390 goals last year. 172 of them were kicked by 6 players, and they were Hawkins, Podsiadly, Motlop, Joel Selwood, Steve Johnson, and Bundy. And that's about 44% of the total goals were kicked by 6 players. And then obviously Podsiadly we let go, and then Motlop is injured, Christensen is injured. So that's about a quarter of our sort of goal total from last year is not going to be out on the field. And I guess compounding that is the fact that the 2 players we thought would sort of be able to step up and help with that goal total in Vardy and Kirsten are also both injured. So as we said before, Vardy's out for the season and Kirsten is looking at a sort of mid-year return. So there's sort of legitimate concerns how we're going to kick all our goals.
I guess the logical place to start is who is leading the race for that centre-half forward position with Kirsten and Vardy unavailable.
Well, yeah. So I will go out and confirm on air that I am a bit of a Mitch Brown fan. I understand the criticisms against his game. I think they're valid to an extent. I do think the difference in perception between Vardy and Brown, given what they've actually produced on the field, is a bit too much. But I guess the broader point I wanted to make was that there was a really good article in the Champion Data Prospectus on attacking efficiency. I won't go into the whole thing because it's all this sort of fancy maths. But it sort of made the basic point that, yes, the actual ability of your forward line to kick goals is really important, but obviously the supply is also really important. Yep. And so they talked about it in terms of our territory and forward half. And we were actually the dominant team in that category last year. We, on average, spent an extra 19 minutes in our forward half compared to, say, per game. Whereas the next closest team was Hawthorn, and they only spent 11 and a half minutes.
Yep.
So we actually were really dominant in that sense. We weren't maybe as efficient as we could have been. But I think that sort of highlights we should still be able to kick goals and kick an attacking score if we're able to continue that kind of dominance in territory, which basically rests on midfield. And looking at it from individual player perspectives, you look at someone like Matty Stokes. For most of his career at Geelong, he's averaged about 1.5 goals a game, which translates into roughly 30 goal seasons. Last year, that production halved because he didn't spend anywhere near as much time inside forward 50 because he was in midfield racking up disposals. So I think there is just a degree of you generate goals just because you spend time inside forward 50 rather than you need players kicking goals, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
Having said that, it is obviously still a concern. Brown needs to seize this opportunity and start probably kicking at least 1.5 goals, 2 goals a game to match the kind of output we got from Podsiadly last year. I guess the other one is Bartel. So rather than put him in the back line as we did last year, there's talk of him going forward. And yeah, you would hope he would be able to kick a significant number of goals given he's always been able to do that and he's really strong overhead. And so potentially he could be that medium tall target that we've been after for a while.
I love the idea of Bartel on the forward line. I think pretty much everything we've seen of him there has been good, which I guess it applies to every single position you put him in. But there's nothing but positives. You know, he's a great overhead mark. Kicked a brilliant goal in the 2011 grand final. I don't think anyone can get that one out of their head.
All of them. All of his goals in 2011.
All of his goals. Yeah.
Just endlessly replaying.
PO, what do you think?
Yeah, I agree with that. I think pretty much second tall forward. I tend to agree with TJ in the sense that I don't think number of goals from second tall forward, I don't think is massively important. As depleted as we are in personnel, we've the last 2, 3, 4 years we've always been a high scoring team, and if we have enough ball in our forward line, we've got a lot of skilled players. We'll kick goals anyway. Most of it will be from the midfielders. But what we need from the second tall forward, because our pattern at the moment is to kind of kick the ball longer than we used to, and kind of attack really quickly off the back half, we need someone who can really make a contest and create opportunities for those midfielders when it comes down to ground level. So for me, Brown should get first shot, and that's what he needs to do. He's always efficient. Like, I really love him as a kind of smart player, like medium forward, good kick for goal. So I think he should score a goal or two a game, but more we need him to be a presence and create opportunities for other people at ground level.
I guess it's that cliche that, you know, he's going to take their Lonergan equivalent defender out of the equation.
Maybe, although I think unfortunately sides are always going to gravitate towards Hawkins. Like, he's such a good forward. They're not going to be fooled and think, oh well, Mitch Brown's there. Well, you know,
Yeah.
Kind of. But that might work well the other way. Like, they might not respect him, and he's the sort of guy. I'm not saying he'll be as good, but he actually reminds me of Jack Gunston in that, like, he only needs 10 touches to kick 3 goals. Like, he's an efficient player.
Yeah.
So that might work well. But primarily what I want to see from him, and I thought we saw some really good signs during the preseason, like he hit contests harder than I've seen before. He actually tackled. He did a really good turnover tackle against North, which we got a goal from. Things like that, I think, will just help the structure, and the rest of it will just work around it. And I'd be very happy to see Bartel up forward as well.
I think as far as our overall goal tally is concerned, the fact that anything below Hawkins' shoulders won't be considered a dead ball this year will certainly be a big positive. He's definitely looking much fitter than he was last season. In fact, I haven't seen any sign whatsoever that he's still hampered from that injury. If we're getting, 65 goals a season, which he's capable of, instead of, what was it last year, 42, I think.
About that.
That's a decent chunk of, as TJ said, the tally that we're missing from, Bundy and Motlop and Podsy Adley.
And I mean, you can, just on the Brown issue, I think maybe the other advantage of him as well is the fact he is a lead-up player, and so, like, for the last couple of years, that Podsy Adley-Hawkins tandem, it's been about kicking long to a contest, and it's good that we've still got that ability with Hawkins, but sometimes I think that would just become too predictable, and I wonder if it's a good thing that we now have a player who's prepared to make really long leads up onto a forward flank, up onto a wing, and almost force midfielders to spot him up rather than just let's fire it, let's chip it around a little bit and then fire it deep to the square and hope we can get the big pack mark.
Yeah. What was I going to say? I hope Josh Walker doesn't listen to the podcast because he's not getting much of a run in tonight. How does he fit into the equation?
Well, it should be. I guess that's the other thing about this whole Mitch Brown debate, and will he make it? Well, let's give him a block of time to find out, and if his form isn't good enough, and Josh Walker is playing well in the reserves, then you give Josh Walker a go. And as I said, I'm a Mitch Brown fan, but I've got absolutely no problem with that happening. And I don't think Walker is Walker is a really hard-working player. I don't think he's necessarily as clean or efficient as Mitch, as P.O. just said. But he can also hit packs hard. He can create a contest. And he is a really elite athlete. So, I'd be perfectly happy if mid-season and the Brown experiment hasn't worked out to put him in at centre-half forward and give him a go.
Having said that, I do agree with both of you that Mitch Brown should be the first to get a shot. I think Walker has been given the opportunity that Brown hasn't, and hasn't seized it yet. I'll take you back to the qualifying final, in that respect, and just not good enough. Like I was watching him for about 30 minutes in the pre-game warm-up, and you could just tell even then that we weren't in for a good result from Josh Walker that day. Like he could not hit the side of a barn, lining up for goal. But as you say, he creates a contest. He is a great presence, but at some point you need that presence who's getting the opportunities, getting the long bombs into the forward line to actually be converting the opportunities.
Yeah, which I guess is the knock on Vardy as well. Sorry, PR, you go.
No, the only thing I would say, I mean, I agree with that. I just think the only thing I would say with the Fremantle game, I think it's quite clear now with the stuff that's come out in the media since that they only decided to pull Hawkins out on the morning of that game. They had decided to play him all week, and then they changed their mind after the last training session. So I think you need to remember that Josh Walker had probably about as much notice as we did.
Yeah.
And that can't have been good for a guy coming in to try and play his first final. I know that's a different issue for us another day, but just the way they managed it, they didn't give him any opportunities to get form prior to finals. So I wouldn't hang him on that. He did play some decent footy prior to that. For me, I just think Brown, like this has to be Brown's year if he's to stay on the list after this year. And he's had really good preseason form, so he deserves a go. Like he should be first picked, in my opinion. But the reality is they like Walker because he's a really hard worker. He doesn't get injured a lot. He is structurally, he's useful to the team. He'll get his opportunities because a lot of our talls, they get injured a lot, and even Brown does, and they need management. So I don't think Josh should be too worried. There'll be enough opportunities for him, particularly now that we're down on a few talls. There'll be enough opportunities for him to get games.
Mitch Brown, say potentially he had an absolutely stellar season up forward this year. There's still the unknown for him after this year, because then Vardy comes back and there's, again, not a position for him.
Well, if he has a stellar year, then you'd think the onus would be on Vardy for him to show that he should displace him. I guess the other thing that's probably worth mentioning with Brown as well is they did this whole thing last year where they would push Taylor and even occasionally Lonergan forward and push Podsiadly back. And Brown potentially offers the ability to do that as well. I know...
Probably more than Podsiadly did, you'd say.
Yeah, and I know his excursions as a backman in the AFL last year weren't stellar, and I know as well as like a lot of Brown fans have said, well, you know, he's played out of position as a defender. I don't really agree with that because I think he's played, you know, great footy as a defender in the VFL, just as he's played great footy as a forward in the VFL. So he should be able to translate that to AFL level. But maybe they seem to be big on this idea of flexibility, so maybe that's another tick in Brown's favour.
Anyway, moving on to the first game of the season. It's Geelong versus Adelaide, 7:10 p.m. Thursday at Simmons Stadium. It's the great Jimmy Bartell's 250th game. Last time these two teams met was round 17 of last year at Amy Stadium, when Adelaide got the job done by 2 points. Joel Corey and Mitch Duncan led the way that day with 27 and 24 disposals respectively. Simpson had a lazy 33 hitouts and 18 disposals. And Josh Caddy, as he always is, was great with 3 goals and 18 disposals. What are your initial thoughts on the game? I'll start with you, Pio.
I think, I suppose it's a bit of an unknown how all sides are going to play. And I watched some of the footy on the weekend, and, you know, the teams you thought wouldn't win, they did. So
Yeah.
I think we're big favourites for this game, but maybe that doesn't mean much. I think Adelaide have looked pretty good during the preseason too. They've obviously got a lot of injuries, as do we, and that probably helps us a bit. But I think we'll need our close to our best footy.
I've actually Sorry, go on.
They've got a really good midfield, and obviously Dangerfield is a huge worry for us. Like we have to find someone to curb him somehow.
Yeah.
And even with their injuries, They've still got a good forward line. Podsiadly will straighten them up a fair bit. They've got some good small forwards, Betts in particular, obviously. So they'll be a good opponent.
I've actually got Adelaide's injury list in front of me here. It's Douglas, who's out. He won't play. Henderson, Lynch, Otten, Nathan Van Berlo, obviously, and Taylor Walker. So in a way, it's almost as extensive as ours. You'd have to say we've been the hardest hit, but they're not far behind there. So it's going to be two very depleted sides. Right off the bat, you'd have to think Harry Taylor would take James Podsiadly, the former Cat, coming back to the his former hunting ground. TJ?
I think so.
Yeah, they might. I would like to see Taylor play on pods, absolutely. I do wonder if they'll push Lonergan on to him, though, to try and allow Taylor to be a bit more of an attacking threat. But, yeah, let's say Taylor for pods.
There's no real huge... well, there's threats, but, there's only Jenkins and Porplesia outside of Podsiadly. They don't exactly have the best firepower in the competition that we're coming up against this week.
No. Well, I mean, with Walker out, that is a huge shout for them.
Yeah. I guess the other big point to consider is Dangerfield, as you mentioned before. What's the matchup going to be there? Are we going to see a Taylor Hunt, or are we going to see one of our bigger name players sort of go one-on-one and try and beat him to every ball? P.O., what do you think?
Yeah, I wouldn't recommend going head-to-head with Dangerfield. He's such a damaging player. He lifts his team the way he just gets the ball with three blokes hanging off him and still gets an effective clearance. I think probably Taylor Hunt, I would assume, will get first go. I noticed he tagged Brent Harvey last week and did a good job on the stream that I watched. So I think he'll probably go first, and then what they'll do when Hunt needs to go to the bench will be interesting. Like, do they run a hard tag, and does he go everywhere Dangerfield goes? Because Dangerfield will go forward as well. So does he take him when he goes forward? Or does he stay in midfield and maybe Guthrie picks him up, or someone else gets the matchup? But I think Hunt will probably start with him.
What do you think, TJ?
Well, I was going to say, I reckon, I think PO's probably, Hunt would be the obvious choice. But what about Guthrie? He plays as a defender, a small defender. He's been able to negate opponents before. He can hurt you going the other way. Is he the guy to put with Dangerfield? Because you can probably match him for that burst of acceleration as well, although probably not strength. But I wouldn't mind seeing that. Dangerfield's
sort of that player that you've really got to watch more so than the other main midfielders, other teams, just because of his pace. He's up there with the fastest players in the competition. Like, he wins the grand final sprint every year. It's certainly going to be a very dangerous part of the game on Thursday night.
The other one, while we're on midfield matchups, and also going to sort of another player we haven't talked about, but who divides opinion a bit, would you run George Holland-Smith on Scott Thompson?
Interesting.
I think that's the perfect matchup for him. Someone who can't do him for pace, and who Thompson also goes ball hunting. So, Holland-Smith would have ability and freedom to hunt the ball the other way, work on him and work off him. Having said that, I'm not sure if Holland-Smith's actually going to get picked. I mean, that's the first hurdle.
Yeah, I was going to say that myself. I didn't actually...
He's actually going to get picked tomorrow. I have my doubts.
Partridge will be up in arms.
Well, I'll be disappointed if he doesn't play, but I have... We've talked a bit, obviously, in the show tonight about flexibility and that sort of thing, with the rucks and also with Guthrie and with Hunt. And the thing that counts against Holland-Smith is versatility. Like, he's a really, really good player, in my opinion, but doesn't really have a second position. And that will count against him if they're picking, say, the 21st or the 22nd guy to go in the side. That's my worry.
Yeah.
But, yeah, it'd be a good matchup for him if he plays.
Well, I was going to say myself, I just can't see where to put him in the side. With Guthrie as a midfielder, I'd probably have Thurlow in the side as a defender. Taylor Hunt would have to find his way into the side somehow, surely. I didn't actually find a spot for him. So it'll be interesting to see if he is picked, as you said, because he really does strike me as that perfect matchup for Scott Thompson, like you mentioned. What do you see the other big main matchups on the ground being, TJ?
Well, we were just talking about who takes Eddie Betts, who obviously is the Crows' big free agent signing. He's a dangerous player. Again, I guess the obvious answer would be Corey Enright, but Scotty seems to have flagged him maybe playing a bit more of an attacking role further up the ground. So it could be a big test for Jackson Thurlow straight out of the gates.
Interesting, yep. Or even a Taylor Hunt.
Yeah, Taylor Hunt if he doesn't run with
If
Dangerfield.
he doesn't run with Dangerfield, yep.
Yeah, I think Enright for security would like, but probably either Guthrie or Hunt, whichever one is back, because I don't think they'll both be back at the same time. Like Hunt would only probably be back if Guthrie is up the field. So one of those two could take him.
Well, if Thurlow's in the side, you might not see either of them back for a fair chunk of the game.
True.
Because we've got, you'd expect the backline to just be, certainly I do, Thurlow, Lonergan, Rivers, Enright, Taylor, Mackie, and maybe a James Kelly floating back every so often, or a Taylor Hunt or a Cam Guthrie, but not as one of the real back six that we see for the majority of the game. Another big matchup, obviously we're going to see, you'd imagine it'd be Daniel Talia on Tom Hawkins, TJ?
Yeah, you would think that would be the obvious matchup. And that, I think that should be a really good contest. Talia is a really good young player. Hawkins wins more one-on-one contests than any other player in the competition, I think, if I'm remembering my sort of vague specialist statistics correctly. So it should be a really, really good contest. Hopefully a fit Hawkins can have the better of him.
Yeah. It's a big matchup because we need obviously Hawkins to really kick some goals with the forward outs that we've got. So if Talia can keep him to, maybe only 1 or 2 goals, that will go a long way for them towards winning. The other thing it does make me think of, though, is one advantage it might have. I mean, we need Hawkins to overcome him, but it might, from what I had a look at what Adelaide's like on their board today, what their side might be, it might actually kind of leave Rutten without a matchup, and we might be able to use that because Rutten is kind of the perfect matchup for a player of Pod's size and ability. Yeah. Whereas he doesn't strike me as an ideal matchup for, say, Mitch Brown. If Mitch Brown's going to be roaming all over the ground, he should be able to really do him for a turning circle. So
yeah, most definitely.
Given we don't really have many tall forwards to pick from, he might actually get stuck without a matchup a bit, and that's something I think we might actually be able to exploit if we've got, say, Bartel there or a few kind of more mobile forwards. Whoever's on him might actually really be able to get off the leash a bit.
Yeah, well, definitely.
Just looking at one of the sides I've got off the Adelaide board for Adelaide's side, actually, we could actually have their tools spread fairly thin. We talked about earlier how Hamish McIntosh, Dawson Simpson, and Mark Blitzarves might play, along with a Mitch Brown and a Tom Hawkins. That's going to be running their ruckman ragged, Sam Jacobs. You'd expect Jenkins to be wanting to help out there. I feel we'll have a real upper hand in the ruck battle, and Jenkins might not be able to afford to go forward too much because he's helping out Jacobs so much.
Yeah, hopefully.
Best case scenario.
That will be a pretty interesting matchup in its own way. What happens in the ruck, as we've already talked about, it's a bit hard to speculate given we don't know exactly which ruckmen are playing. But Jenkins could potentially struggle.
Last time we came against Adelaide, I actually mentioned this earlier, it was Dawson Simpson with 33 hitouts and 18 disposals. He absolutely dominated Jacobs that day. So with McIntosh to back him up, we could have a really, really nice combination there. We just hope that will be the case, I guess.
Yep.
Yeah, we just need to hope for their form because obviously they've had time out and they've been a bit rusty. I think if both of them are playing well, we'll have the upper hand. We just, hope that they don't both come in and kind of really find it tough.
Any other general thoughts on the game, guys?
No, just a bit. I was just thinking that, even though probably, say, Collingwood and Carlton were maybe not... Well, Collingwood definitely wasn't a favourite going into the game on Friday. and even Carlton, like not unexpected, they lost to Port Adelaide. But in both cases, it seems to have induced this sort of mini crisis of, did we do the right things in extending Buckley, and is he the right coach, and where are Carlton at, blah blah blah. And I just wonder if the same thing will happen a little bit to us, particularly given some of the list decisions.
If we were to lose, yeah.
Yeah, if we were to lose, if Pods kicks 3 and Mitch Brown has a terrible game, I can imagine there'll be some meltdowns on the board and some questions about whether or not we've thrown away our competitive edge and blah, blah, blah. So could be a pretty crucial game for the perception of where Geelong are at.
I'm just imagining the comments I'm going to get on the Facebook page on Friday morning if, we struggle to kick goals and, we should have kept Paul Chapman and blah, 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 blah.
Yeah.
It's always going to come back to Chapman if we happen to lose against Adelaide. That's a very good point you make.
Yeah. So that is my classic sort of glass half empty perspective.
Yeah.
What if we lose?
So I'm being more positive, but Adelaide are a good side, and I rate Sanderson as a coach. I think always, every time they play against us, they seem to have, I don't know whether it's because he has come from Geelong, but they always seem to have a way of actually besting us in the midfield, which is quite surprising because we usually do that the other way around to most sides. But whereas whenever we play Adelaide, like I remember the game we played against them in Adelaide last year, like the first quarter and a half, we were getting belted in the middle, despite the fact that Simpson was getting most of the hit outs. They just had a system to get the ball straight out of the midfield, and we didn't. So I think it'll be a tough game. I think we'll win, but not by a lot.
Yep. Just generally on Adelaide, where do you guys see them finishing this season? What kind of opposition in general do you think we're going to be coming up against?
Oh, it's just hard to. I was about to say it's really hard to get a read on Adelaide because they had that prelim final 2 seasons ago where they played really well, and the feeling was they had a soft draw, and that seems to have been substantiated a little bit last year. But they've got a lot of talent, as P.O. says. Sando seems to be a great coach. I think they sort of underperformed last year, so I would think they'd be in contention for sort of between 5th to 8th.
Wow. So certainly myself, I don't have them in the 8. I was thinking more sort of 10th, 11th. Maybe a slight improvement on last season, but certainly not a big jump. What do you think, P.O.?
I think they're mid-table. Like, I think for me, if you look at the ladder, there's a clearly defined probably top 4 or 5 sides, and hopefully I'm thinking we're still one of them.
Yep.
If our injury list can thin out a bit. And then there's really, you could throw a blanket over the sides that maybe would be anywhere from, say, 6 through to 10. There's a lot of sides like North and West Coast, if they have a better run with injuries. Adelaide, if they have a better run with injuries.
Essendon, even Collingwood.
Yeah, Essendon, Collingwood towards that range. I think Adelaide's in that range. Probably for me, the only thing that I would say about Adelaide, and you could say this a bit about any side, but they're very heavily reliant on 2 or 3 players. Like Jacobs is basically the only ruckman on their list. If he goes down, like we talk about our ruck problems, but if he goes down, they're stuffed. They're very heavily reliant on Dangerfield, as you would be. And, with Taylor Walker out, they're very thin. That's the whole reason they got Pods. So they're kind of, if they are to have any injuries to any of those players, I think they'll really struggle. But otherwise, I think, I could certainly see them making the finals.
So having said that, guys, who are we tipping? I'll start with you, TJ.
Oh, Geelong. I'll stay loyal.
I would hope so. How much do you reckon they'll win by?
2 goals.
2 goals. P.O., tipping a margin?
Yeah, pretty much the same margin. 10 points, I'd say.
Really? That close?
Yeah, as I said, I don't think we'll win by a lot. And I think also the other thing I'm expecting is probably first game of the year that will look quite good, but then maybe we'll fatigue a bit towards the end of the game. So I'm expecting us to get a lead, but then kind of just hang on to it.
Okay. I've got us 25 points I think we'll win by. I think being at Simmons Stadium, it's just too big of an advantage to the Cats on what otherwise could be quite a close game, perhaps at AAMI Stadium. Guys, I think that's everything.
Just one thing that I think our gloriously absent leader would want us to say.
Yep.
for the first podcast for the year. We are recruiting. So if you're on Bigfooty and you're keen, I imagine we'll put a thread up when this gets posted and just say that you're interested and you'll get a gig.
Yep. I did do a bit of a recruiting drive today. Bobby wasn't interested, unfortunately.
Oh, damn it.
Oh.
I would have loved that.
I'm hoping by the end of the season we'll convince him to join us. So Bobby,
All right, the get Bobby
Yeah,
bandwagon.
we've got to get Bobby on the show.
I think
But
SJ can perhaps SJ can get that hashtag going on the Bigfooty Cats. But
Yeah.
Bobby, if you're listening, this is your call to arms.
But
Yeah,
yeah, do
definitely.
volunteer. We got plenty of room on the boat. The boat's not full, and it's a good chance to we want to get different people's ideas in rather than just ours. So we'd love the board to take ownership of it if you're listening and you want to jump on board. And the other thing is you don't even have to be a panelist if you don't want to. If you've got ideas of pictures or tweets or topics, even topics that you want to send in that you want us to put on the podcast, then just send them in. You can send it. You can either post it on Bigfooty or you can send to us through Twitter because we're all on Twitter and we will put the stuff on the show.
We're kind of thinking we'll have a group of maybe 5 regular hosts that will kind of rotate through, and maybe a guest every so often on top of that. So yeah, definitely let us know if you're interested, and we'll get you involved. TJ, thanks very much for joining us.
Thanks, mate.
PO,
Go Cats. Looking forward to Thursday.
All right, thanks, guys. And hopefully, when we're back next week, it'll be off a win.
Yeah, exactly.
let's hope we'll have something positive to talk about. See you next time. Go Cats.